World. Controversial TV presenter Piers Morgan jumped in on the discussion, slamming the move, and some fans have ridiculed the choice. So I can hear our listeners talking already about this. I can see the texts coming through. What do you think? Julie Hartley-Moore, you first. What do you think? Fireman Sam, or should it be firefighter Sam?
Oh, please.
Fireperson Sam.
Not forget fireperson. I mean, police person. You know, that's just taking it too far. I mean, it's ridiculous. The world's gone mental when it starts doing stuff like this. Seriously, there's female firefighters. I'm sure they don't care what they're firefighters. That's what they are. I had a fire in my backyard, and the first person that jumped out of the truck was a girl.
Right.
So, you know, I mean.
Yeah, I found this one a bit, again, maybe it's my word for today, odd, because there's Penny Moss, and she's one of the characters of this program. If you're going to promote it to out there, and try and recruit fire, women and men, well, they've got a character, Penny Moss. Is in their stable of characters. Why they didn't just take up, Firefighter Sam and put Penny Moss as part of the campaign? So it's an odd one because they've got amongst their stable of characters women firefighters, and all of a sudden that's just they took it just a bit over the top on this one because
apparently that was recently added. My producer says, but look, there was a campaign a couple of years ago to change Fireman Sam name to Firefighter Sam. Does it have the same ring? Firefighter Sam.
Well, Firefighter Sam's great, but Fireman Sam, I mean, look, it's just crazy. It is craziness. And it's person, fire person, police person. We are men and women. Get over it.
I'm just thinking, we're talking about this in the office quite a bit, actually. Sorry. And if it doesn't cost anything, if it's free to do, and if it says to a young girl who's the age of 8 or 9 says, hey, I can be a firefighter too. And subconsciously, if that person is a fireman, that might cut her off from those opportunities of getting to the fire service. And if it's free to do, and if it doesn't hurt anybody, why not change it? Why not change the language?
Well, you know what? I reckon if anyone wants to do something bad enough, they're not going to give a continental what it's called. If you want to be a police person from an early age, like I did.
Yeah.
I couldn't have cared less whether I was a policewoman, policeman, whatever. I just wanted to join the police. So
language doesn't. You think that language doesn't matter?
I think if you're determined, if you really want to do something. Having said that, I didn't do it. Well, they didn't. They said I was too feminine, and I didn't have the education to cover it. So. But, I left school at 14, so that was the reason why, a lot of the reason why. But even so, it didn't deter me to do what I do now.
Right.
So all investigators were men when I started. So, I think if you want to do something, whether you're called a fireman or a firewoman or a fire person, you're going to do it.
Yeah, and that's, if you talk to any service when they're going out to recruit, a brand, that's all it is. It's just a brand. It's what sits in behind it. And you've got policies and you've got recruitment policies that are looking to recruit diversity within the organisation. That's far more important than a brand.
Oh, the listeners are speaking. What about Postman Pat?
I thought of Postman Pat. I did.
Well, Postman Patsy.
Yeah, exactly. I thought of that.
Peter, for you and Julia Hartley-Moore, thank you very much for being with me. Thank you to Ali for putting the show together. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you next time.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, Scott Barrett joins his brother Bowden in the starting lineup for the All Blacks World Cup opener on Saturday night. The government's fresh water policy is a washout with some Canterbury farmers. Is showing menstrual blood on TV offensive and degrading to women, or simply reflecting a fact of life? Parents of children with Down syndrome fear changes to abortion laws could lead to more termination on the ground of disability. The government's bought Kate Shepherd's house. Could Ehu Mātou be on the shopping list too? Simon Bridges goes to Wanaka and promises National will build a new birthing centre if re-elected. And drunk middle-aged women looking for a Fleetwood Mac concert, you're being put on notice.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Minister of Māori Development, Nanaia Mahuta, will not rule out the Crown purchasing land at Ihumātao. Mana whenua of the South Auckland site reached a consensus yesterday that they want the land back and out of private ownership. Ms Mahuta met with mana whenua twice in July and says no discussion was had about the Crown purchasing the land, but she says she won't rule out anything.
I've had 2 meetings, each well reported in the media, and I regularly meet with my ministerial colleagues and talk about a variety of topics. Ihumātao is likely to have been one of them. It's not a matter of whether I will rule anything or out. This government is trying to find a constructive solution to a complex set of issues at Ihumātao.
The Māori Development Minister, Nanaia Mahuta. The All Blacks have named their side for the World Cup opener against South Africa in Tokyo on Saturday night. It largely resembles the side that trounced Australia 36-0 in the final Bledisloe Cup test in Auckland last month. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
The only change from that Eden Park test is at lock, with Scott Barrett returning to the starting 15 in place of Patrick Tuipulotu, who drops to the bench. It means Richie Mo'unga will start at first 5 with Bowden Barrett at fullback, while Ryan Crotty gets the nod at second 5'8" ahead of Sonny Bill Williams, who's in the reserves. The test will be the 99th between the two sides, which means the 100th encounter could be the World Cup final in November. The last test between New Zealand and South Africa was the 16-all draw in Wellington in July. This is Stephen Hewson.
A South Canterbury farmer says if farming is to continue in New Zealand, nitrogen standards in the government's proposed freshwater action plan will have to be reassessed. More than 250 farmers gathered in Timaru this afternoon to hear officials outline aspects of the policy that will affect them. A dairy farmer near Waimate, John Gregan, says the proposed standard for nitrogen levels in rivers would be impossible to meet. Another meeting will be held in Timaru this evening. Mothers say maternity care in Wanaka is at breaking point. Wanaka has 2 lead maternity carers, with more than 200 births predicted in the area over the next year. Meeting with mothers and community members today, Nationals leader Simon Bridges announced the town will get a birthing unit if his party wins the next election. Kimberly Davis says she and other Wanaka mothers are worried midwives are being stretched with no long-term solutions in sight. Ms Davis says Wanaka needs a primary birthing unit.
This is not an issue that has just developed in the past 18 months or 2 years. It's something that has been coming and that midwives all over the country have been trying to tell MPs in our government was close to breaking point. It's now at breaking point.
Kimberly Davis says midwives also need to be paid better so more are encouraged to work in Wanaka. The Prime Minister has expressed the need to further strengthen the economic relationship with Japan in light of the current global climate. Jacinda Ardern has met with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo today. Japan is this country's 4th largest trading partner. Ms Ardern says in the face of global economic headwinds, the relationship with Japan is becoming even more important for the economy.
It is a challenging and changing global and regional environment, and New Zealand and Japan enjoy a stable long-term relationship that in recent years has only gone from strength to strength. Japan and New Zealand are natural partners, and we agree that there is much more that we can do together in the region but also globally.
Jacinda Ardern says trade, women's economic empowerment, the Pacific and space were all discussed with her Japanese counterpart. A former Defence chief denied the response to the allegations in Hit and Run was a shambles. The Operation Burnham inquiry is investigating allegations in the book that 6 civilians were killed during a New Zealand-led raid in Afghanistan in 2010, and the military covered up what happened. Immediately after the operation, the Defence Force's response was that it was unlikely civilians were killed. However, a report produced in 2011 concluded civilian casualties may have occurred. Following Hit and Run's release in 2017, then Defence Chief, retired Lieutenant General Tim Keating, repeated the incorrect line.
I think that our processes of a defence force weren't coherent in giving the response that we should have been able to give in hindsight now.
Tim Keating. The hearing continues. Thousands of people gathered in Nuku'alofa this morning for the funeral of Tonga's late Prime Minister Akilisi Pohiva. Mr Pohiva died in Auckland last Thursday after being medevaced from Tonga the previous day. Kalifi Moala was at the service at the Free Wesleyan Church.
Her Majesty Queen Nana Sipau attended, as well as Princess Latu Fuipeka. They were the honored guests, as well as nobles, and of course ministers of the cabinet and distinguished people from many different walks of life. That was a very blessed service indeed, with the main choir of the Free Wesleyan Church singing, and attended by mostly civil servants, friends, and families from the government from different parts of Tonga. For a man loved by a lot of people, and definitely the most distinguished personality in the last 30 or so years of politics in the Kingdom of Tonga.
Kalafi Moala for RNZ Pacific in Nuku'alofa. It's 5:05. In naming his side for the All Blacks opening World Cup match against South Africa, coach Steve Hansen insists he doesn't have a first choice lineup. Hansen has largely named the side that overwhelmed Australia 36-0 in the final Bledisloe Cup test in Auckland last month for Saturday's World Cup opener in Tokyo. The Springbok test shapes up as the All Blacks' toughest pool match, but Hansen won't label it his top lineup.
I don't think we've got a number one starting 15. I think we've got a group of 23 players that we'll use depending on who we're playing, and that'll chop and change. We never look at, is it important to start? Obviously it's important to finish too, and you've got to have people that can do that.
Steve Hansen. The Central District's boss, Pete DeVette, says there's little doubt the current standing of New Zealand cricket was reflected in the level of interest in their T20 coaching position. The former Australia, South Africa and Pakistan coach, Mickey Arthur, will take control of the Stags in this summer's Super Smash. DeVette says several former international coaches were interested in the role, and the Black Caps' efforts in recent years helped that. New Zealand light heavyweight Jerome Pampalone has been beaten in the quarterfinals of the Amateur Boxing World Championships in Russia. Last season's runners-up, Tottenham Hotspur, have drawn 2-2 with Greek side Olympiacos in their opening Champions League football match, while English champions Manchester City had a 3-0 win over Shakhtar Donetsk in Ukraine. That's the news.
The worst thing, John, about your proposal, no, let me finish. The people that you would hurt most are the low income.
He's telling fibs. The fact of the matter, see, here's the problem I've got. He pulls numbers out of the sky.
Forget the personal attacks.
Live mayoral debates on Morning Report.
This morning, it's a battle of two former Labour cabinet ministers, John Tamahere and Phil Goff in Auckland.
Local issues on Morning Report. Listen and watch it live on rnz.co.nz and other major news websites, Freeview Channel 50 and on Facebook.
Then on 9 to noon, Professor Elizabeth Elliott, responsible for Australia's Guide to Diagnosing Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, on cutting alcohol abuse in pregnancy. And after 10, scholar Damon Salisa calls for greater recognition of Pacific innovators and leaders. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, a few showers, mainly in the north and east. Auckland to Taumaranui and Taupo, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods and isolated showers. Taranaki, Taihape, Whanganui, Manawatu, Horowhenua and Kapiti. Mostly fine weather. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, fine tonight. A few showers developing tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland, Canterbury, North and Central Otago and Dunedin. Mostly fine but some cloudy periods tomorrow. For Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers clearing tomorrow afternoon. Chatham Islands, occasional showers and strong sou'westerlies, both easing tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 5:09.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The All Blacks have named their team to play their old foes, the Springboks, in their Rugby World Cup opener in Tokyo on Saturday. If you're just joining us, Richie Mo'unga is back at first five, with Bowden Barrett at fullback and Ben Smith dropping to the bench. Scott Barrett will join his brother in the starting 15. He'll play lock in place of the injured Brodie Retallick. Dane Coles gets the hooker's spot, and Ryan Crotty and Anton Leonard-Brown have been retained in the midfield, as have World Cup debutants Sevu Reece and George Bridge on the wings. Coach Steve Hansen says Sonny Bill Williams will provide impact off the bench, and he says Crotty and Leonard-Brown have earned their starting spots, with Crotty providing a familiar face for first five Richie Mo'unga.
Ryan's come back and played really well, played outstandingly for Canterbury when he came back. He played well against Tonga. He's a leader in the group. He's got a kicking game. He's got a strong communicative game and got a good skill set base. And Albie has been the in-form midfielder for the last 6 months.
Mo'unga is back in the first five's driver's seat after missing the Tonga test with a shoulder injury. It will be his World Cup debut, the same for his Crusaders teammates Crotty and Bridge. Mo'unga started in the 16-all draw with South Africa in Wellington in July and says he can't wait for another crack at the box.
Yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait. It's a World Cup. This is the first time for all three of us, so just can't wait. It's been a long time coming, as Crotch said. This is a dream come true, something I've been wanting to do for forever.
We go live now to Joe Porter, who's standing on a train platform on his way to All Blacks training in Tokyo. Joe, this match is about as big as it gets for a pool clash, isn't it?
That's for sure. This is the biggest match as far as it gets for a pool game. The Springboks versus the All Blacks, the two-time defending world champions versus two-time winners previously. It will be an absolute cracker of a match, and it will really set the tone for this World Cup. The anticipation for this match is huge. It is the biggest match of the weekend, and it will set the tone for the rest of the tournament. Remember, no team has won the World Cup after losing a pool game. So there is a lot riding on this match, despite what many people might say.
So what do you make of the two teams, Springboks and the ABs?
Well, the Springboks are pretty much unchanged from the side that drew with the All Blacks 16-all in Wellington in July, so they're fairly confident that they can sort of reproduce that kind of performance and put the All Blacks under pressure. The All Blacks have changed the side up a little bit. They've gone for Crotty in the midfield over Sonny Bill Williams, which many people didn't expect. They've pushed Beauden Barrett back to fullback. There was some temptation to perhaps keep him at first five and Ben Smith at fullback. Hansen seems to be pretty set on using his whole squad. I don't think he's really settled on a first choice starting 15, so to speak. I think he's going to be using his whole squad throughout this tournament and a sort of horses for courses type approach. It's going to be a crack of a match. The two teams are well matched up. They play a different style of game, and in wet conditions, possibly in Yokohama on Saturday night, it could be a really tense battle.
I know this is going to cause a sharp intake of breath, but what would a loss mean for us?
Look, I mean, it would send shockwaves, I guess, through All Blacks fans. Like I say, no team has won the World Cup after losing a pool game. However, when you look at the longer sort of scheme of things, it doesn't seem to make too much of a difference. The All Blacks and South Africa will be on the different sides of the draw. Whoever loses this game will still qualify second in what is quite a weak group and make it through to the quarterfinals. It could easily end up being a Springboks All Black final were that the case. What I think this game does, though, it's the perfect start for a World Cup for these teams. Often the All Blacks come to a tournament like this, they don't know quite where they are. They play some easy games first up. They never know quite how they're tracking as they head towards the quarterfinals. This time round, they know exactly where they are the very first game. And if they lose, Coach Steve Hansen and co know exactly what they need to work on and exactly what they need to improve, and they've got 3 weeks to do that before the quarterfinals. So I think a loss isn't the end of the world. A win, however, gives you the psychological edge. It sets a tone, it stamps, it puts a stamp mark on the ground and says the All Blacks are here to win this tournament. It is ours to lose. So a loss wouldn't be the end of the world, but certainly the All Blacks will want to win, and they want to win with a standout performance. It's the performance that's probably more important. They, really want to set the tone and I guess put a bit of a scare up the rest of the World Cup challengers, who some of them think have a chance this time round.
So which team do you reckon's got the most support there?
Well, I'd have to say it's Wales, the Welsh team. You won't believe it. More than 15,000 Welsh fans, not Japanese, Welsh fans, showed up to their first or second training here in Japan. It's just incredible. 15,000 people to go and watch a couple of guys kick a ball around and do very little else. The Welsh support is heavy and thick on the ground. Of course, there's plenty of English men and women around too. Lots of All Black supporters, though they pale in comparison to the Welsh. The Welsh are very well supported, but the All Blacks are getting a lot of support from the Japanese locals. 7,000 people showed up to their public event yesterday, most of them Japanese, of course, so they are almost, I would say, the Japanese second favourite team here at the World Cup.
So, opening ceremony tomorrow night, opening game in Tokyo, what are we expecting?
Well, the opening ceremony should be fairly interesting. The Japanese Air Force is involved, as well as lots of local artists and performers, and there'll be a light show for about an hour before the actual opening ceremony even kicks off. Now, the opening ceremony has been kept under wraps. We'll see what that pans out tomorrow night, but there's plenty of fan zones set up around Tokyo and outside Tokyo Stadium where that's happening, so it should be quite a good event. There'll be festival atmosphere, lots of local food and culture and entertainment on that walk from the closest train station to the Tokyo Stadium, so it should be a really festive atmosphere where people get to sort of soak up the sights and sounds of what makes Japan a really unique culture and a unique place to host the World Cup, the first in Asia, the first outside the traditional home nations, and it really, really is quite exciting to see what Japan can pull off. They've almost sold out all their tickets. I think 96% of tickets are sold to all matches, so they're very, very close to fulfilling their goal of having every stadium, every match completely sold out.
Thanks, Joe. Great to talk to you. That is Joe Porter, who, as we said, is standing at a train station. He's on his way to All Blacks training there. Also, earlier in the day, he spoke to some fans about how they think their team will go.
And we've got a French, South African, and we know the French are going to be dark horses.
Correct. Dark horses, unreliable.
we maybe said enigmatic.
Enigmatic. Like I said, inexperienced for the time being, but who knows? They could pull a nice trick out of the hat.
And the Box, got to be one of the top 3 favourites.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alongside maybe the All Blacks in England, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely.
France fan Martin isn't terribly confident about his team's chances, but Englishwoman Kat is. However, she thinks the defending champion All Blacks will flop in Japan.
Who do you think's the biggest rivals for the English in this title then?
South Africa.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Don't think the All Blacks have it this year?
No, I don't.
Why?
They haven't been as consistent as they always are.
Aussie Chris thinks the Wallabies might suffer the same fate.
They're coming off some interesting results. Obviously, they thrashed the All Blacks in Perth and then proceeded to get thrashed next week by the All Blacks again. But I reckon they'll go all right, maybe semis and then blow out somewhere.
All Blacks fans are confident and have every right to be so, but supporters like Scott are willing to spread the love.
Our hearts are always with the ABs, but we're supporting the Argentinians, the Welsh, the Namibians, and then we're going to toss up between Italy and Canada, aren't we?
And that was Joe Porter speaking with rugby fans in Tokyo. Back home now, and National leader Simon Bridges travelled to Wanaka today and promised a much-needed birthing unit if his party is elected next year. Maternity care in Wanaka has come under increased scrutiny since June, when a mother gave birth on an office floor. There are only 2 midwives there, so women either give birth at home or travel up to 3.5 hours to Dunedin for additional support. And as Tess Brunton reports, whilst mothers were receptive to the news, they say they don't want a serious issue to become a political football.
It took Kimberly Davis 2 hours to drive from Wanaka to the nearest primary birthing unit due to heavy snow.
Sitting in the front seat of a car with my seatbelt on while it was snowing at 11 o'clock in the evening, just waiting to get to a birthing unit was horrible, and with every kilometre that we drove it became increasingly painful. It's not a reality that I think people are quite aware that women here face.
Local mother Christy James says the maternity care system is fundamentally broken. She gave birth to her son on an office floor 4 days before her planned birth at Dunedin Hospital.
We've got 2 full-time LMCs, and there are a predicted 220 births in this area this year, so that puts them at 110 each. From a mother's standpoint, even though our midwives are incredible and they're amazing at what they do, there is always that question of, is my midwife going to be available when I need her? Because she's looking after so many other women.
She says something will go wrong.
It's just a matter of time before somebody's going to run into a sticky situation where they can't make it to the hospital and there's nobody to care for them, and just hopefully nobody dies.
Wanaka mum Iona Bentley says driving to the nearest primary birthing unit or hospital can be daunting in winter. For her first birth, she was driven the 3.5-hour journey to Dunedin Hospital while having contractions every 3 to 4 minutes.
Roads can be super icy. People go into labour at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter, and they've got to then drive all the way down to Alexandria, labouring in the car. Like, it's pretty full on what we experience here as rural mums. If you could have the birthing unit in Wanaka and take away that drive for people that don't have to go down to the hospital, it'd be amazing.
The 3 mothers are part of the Save Our Wanaka Midwives group, who say the Southern DHB have yet to name a date for the maternal and child hub to be opened in the district. and she says midwives need to be paid more.
It just comes down for me to, we just need to pay the midwives properly. If we paid them properly, then more of them would be working. And if more of them were working, then the support level, everybody's sharing the workload.
Midwife Morgan Wethington says midwives should be properly compensated so more are encouraged to work.
You have some regions where you have a population that cannot support more than one midwife's salary, but you still need 2, 4, 6 midwives to offer a secure service where midwives can take time off and recover and then go back to work.
Simon Bridges told the packed room a birthing unit would get a green light from him if National is elected next year.
Our estimate is about $500,000 investment. And then with the community, we will provide dollar for dollar for everything the community puts in and make sure that's a really top quality facility for young mums.
That's something Kimberly Davis would welcome.
We don't care who does it, what politician, what party, what DHB. We just want somebody to hear what mums all over New Zealand are saying, to hear what midwives are saying, and to actually make a real commitment and take real steps towards improving what is a sort of unacceptable situation.
The Southern District Health Board says it's yet to decide where more primary birthing units should go. But Kimberly Davis says mothers and midwives shouldn't have to wait for an election to see changes. In Wanaka for Checkpoint, Cortez Brunton, Tane.
It's almost 21 after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen to hear from you. What do you make of our chances against the Springboks on Saturday? Or do get in touch about rural maternity services. If you live in a rural part of New Zealand, are you well served there? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Sanitary pad company Libra says an advertisement depicting menstrual blood for the first time on primetime TV in Australia was aimed at breaking down taboos around periods, not shocking people. Hundreds of official complaints were made about the commercial that's part of Libra's Blood Normal campaign, including that its contents were offensive, too graphic, generally embarrassing and humiliating to women. But the Aussie ad regulator has dismissed them all. I asked Libra's marketing manager, Laura Dimachi, what exactly was in the ad?
The ad showed essentially the day of a life of a female going through menstruation and having a period. So from the likes of, being at a dinner party and needing a pad and asking across the table for a pad, or walking to the bathroom and not having shame of putting a pad up the sleeve of your jumper while you're needing to go change your pad. So simple, everyday, examples of what it's like for women today having a period that doesn't necessarily get portrayed in that way. And that's really what we wanted to demonstrate, was that periods are normal and showing them should be too. So why is this such an embarrassing and taboo subject still today?
And I suppose one of the core things in this was the ad actually showed menstrual blood for the first time in an advertisement in primetime TV, as I understand it. What was the context there? What was shown?
So what we showed was, on the first clip, was a vial of what was intended to be menstrual fluid. It wasn't actually for hygiene purposes and so forth like that. But what that intended to do was to actually depict the colour of menstrual blood, which is in fact red, rather than what has been used in the past, which was blue. Because at the end of the day, we're not bleeding blue, it's red blood. So essentially what we wanted to do was face this issue head on and actually show the colour of menstrual fluid in what it actually is, which is red.
And beyond that, what else? There was a young woman going to the toilet. She took down her pants, and what did you see?
So, we also had a scene where we had a woman going to the bathroom and pulling down her underwear, and on that pad was menstrual blood in terms of the colour being red. So again, for filming reasons, it wasn't actual menstrual blood, but it was the colour of menstrual blood being red. So depicting exactly what would be expected, of a female when they have their period and they go to the bathroom and what they see on their pads. So the way that we showed this through the campaign, whether it was, the woman in the shower and, the likelihood of having a bit of blood trickle down the leg, it was all sensitively portrayed in the natural course of what a woman experiences when they're going through their period.
So why do you reckon so many people kicked up about it, and how many people did complain?
Look, we went into this campaign knowing that it was, potentially going to be controversial. We knew that. But look, this all stemmed back from the research that we conducted originally. Libra spoke to over 1,000 men and women, and the statistics that came back were really alarming. So 85% of New Zealand women feel shame and stigma attached to period. And more so, we're seeing that 9 in 10 women are using avoidance behaviours. So they're avoiding talking about their periods, they're not wearing white clothing, or they're avoiding swimming. So we knew going into this campaign that there was potentially going to be some people that felt uncomfortable with the idea. However, overwhelmingly, we've had a really positive response. And, those people that have been positive about it feel that this is the time. The time is right to be starting a new conversation around menstruation, and that really there should be no taboo, no shame or embarrassment attached to this conversation. And it's really needed today.
So the official complaints that went to the advertising regulator, how many were there?
The final number I haven't yet to receive, but I believe we had over 600 complaints here in Australia.
And what were they specifically complaining about? What bothered them?
Look, I think the key ones that we went through based on our review was that essentially they didn't want to see menstrual blood on television, and they even didn't even want to see someone asking for a pad in the open at a dinner party. That was offensive to them.
I've had a look at some of these, and one of the complaints says what's depicted appeals to pedophiles.
Oh, my goodness. I don't even have a response for that. That's absolutely rubbish.
Another one says that you wouldn't expect to see a faeces-covered anus in an advertisement, so that's their reasoning for not wanting to see menstrual blood. Your thoughts on that one?
Look, I think everyone's entitled to their opinion, and at the end of the day, we don't have the research to show that there's such a stigma attached to any other type of bodily functions, but what we do know is that there's a deep stigma rooted and attached to periods, and that's what here at Libra we're trying to destigmatise and normalise periods, and that's the agenda that we're on, that women today should not be shrouded in shame. They shouldn't need or feel the need to hide their periods, because at the end of the day, periods are natural, they are healthy, and, they're normal and they should be shown.
The other one was that it was the subtle demonisation of white people by showing a man engaging in sexual activity with a woman who was menstruating.
Beg your pardon, could you repeat that?
Yes, I can. Another complaint said that it was the subtle demonisation of white people by showing a man having sex with a female who was menstruating.
Right. So I think in the campaign, we showed many types of people from many different backgrounds. We showed a female at a dinner party. We showed what would be a male shopping at the supermarket, purchasing pads for their girlfriend or perhaps their sister or mother. So we showed various versions of everyday life of menstruation in today's society. So we had a number of expressions that was shown in our advertisement.
So were you aiming to, shock people with the ad?
No, it wasn't about shock for us. It was around bringing a conversation that isn't happening in today's society. The research that Libra conducted showed that there was just such a taboo and stigma attached to having a period, and the research also showed that almost 70% of people really want to see a more realistic representation of menstruation and periods in mainstream culture and advertisement, and being that on TV or in the digital platform. So whilst there is a taboo, the people are wanting change in this area.
Would you walk through the office with a pad in your hand going to the toilet?
Absolutely, no shame about that whatsoever.
And do you have blokes in your office?
We do. Actually, at the back, we have been manufacturing in Australia for over 40 years, and we are on a manufacturing site which is predominantly male-driven, and we've got male operators producing the products every single day for us, so we are heavily male-dominated in that space, so it's fantastic.
I'm interested to know, what do they think of the campaign? What do they reckon?
They think it's fantastic. I mean, they live and breathe this every day, and their response is that it's normal. So why is there an issue?
And that is Laura Dimachi from Libra there, talking about the ad campaign that they ran in Australia. And if you are interested, the regulator in Australia, Ad Standards, found the commercial does not depict women in an unfair way or in a manner that's likely to humiliate or incite ridicule. The amount of blood depicted in the ad is not excessive or disproportionate and is justified in the context of an ad for such products. It also considered that the ad is communicating an important social message and promoting equality and demystifying menstruation. We'll put that up on our website. You can check out the ad for yourself. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, parents of children with Down syndrome fear changes to abortion laws could lead to more terminations on the grounds of disability. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apologises after a photograph emerged of him wearing brown face at a private school party 18 years ago. We'd love to hear from you. Interested to know what you think of the Libra ad campaign there, which actually depicted menstrual blood. Would you be offended by that, or is it just a natural part of life? Get in contact. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go now to the headlines with Susanna.
A treaty expert says the Crown has played a role in causing the land dispute at Ihumatao and now must help find a solution. Mana Whenua of the South Auckland site agreed yesterday that they want the land back and out of private ownership. But the acting Prime Minister Winston Peters says government intervention would set a precedent. But treaty expert Carwyn Jones says those fears are overblown. The All Blacks have named their side for the World Cup opener against South Africa in Tokyo on Saturday night. It largely resembles the side which beat Australia 36-0 in the final Bledisloe Cup test in Auckland last month. The Prime Minister and her Japanese counterpart have covered a broad range of topics in Tokyo today, from trade and women's economic empowerment to the Pacific and space. Jacinda Ardern says Japan is our fourth largest trading partner, and she spoke with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of the need to further strengthen the economic relationship. There are now 46 confirmed cases of measles in Northland. The Northland District Health Board says vaccinations are being prioritised for children between 12 months and 5 years. It says children who aren't immunised should stay away from schools where measles have been reported. Wellington and Porirua Polytechnics are axing 55 full-time teaching jobs by the end of the year, fewer than originally proposed. Welltech and Whitireia Institutes have struggled to make ends meet because of falling enrolments, and Whitireia last year needed a $15 million government bailout. The Institute's Joint Chief Executive Chris Gosling says the redundancies will save up to $4 million a year. A serious crash on State Highway 1 south of Autokey this evening has closed the southbound lane. Traffic is being diverted via South Manukau Road and Waitohu Valley Road, and the Transport Agency says to expect major delays. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thank you, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It is time now for business news with Madison Reedy. Hi, Maddie.
Hello.
GDP figures, so they landed today. Give us the numbers.
Yes, so this country's economic growth in gross domestic product grew 0.5% in the June quarter. That takes annual growth to 2.1%, and that is the slowest economic growth New Zealand has seen since 2013. Now, these figures were pretty much in line with expectations. In fact, the market actually expected things to be slightly worse. So the consensus forecast that economists were picking was for 0.4% quarterly growth and 2% annual growth. Now, our economic growth is actually mostly being upheld at the moment by the services sector, which makes up 2/3 of our economy. Now, the services sector was the largest contributor to GDP in the June quarter, and it offset declines seen in both the manufacturing sector and the construction industry too. Now, the interesting thing about GDP is that it is a rear view measure, so it tells us largely what happened. Although economists, thinking that they are, readers of the future, they like to think about what's going to happen in the future. So they say that these rear view GDP figures suggest that the future actually does not look much brighter at all. They say that we need need more fiscal stimulus, which is government spending. They reckon the time is now for the government to loosen the purse strings, so they say.
Interesting. It's going to be interesting to see the political reaction to that too. Maddie, economy in Australia, not looking too hot.
No, it's not looking too hot. So if you think our GDP and our economic growth is disappointing, all you have to do is just look across the Tasman and see how theirs is going. So our Kiwi dollar has actually been dragged down today, and that's actually not because of our GDP numbers at all. It's actually because there was economic figures that came out of Australia too. So today the Aussies released their unemployment figures, and their unemployment rate ticked up in the month of August to 5.3%. But that's actually despite the Australian economy creating double the amount of jobs in the month of August than economists over there were expecting. So the Australian economy created 35,000 jobs in the single month of August, whereas economists were picking it to create just 15,000. So really that means that all the work that the Australian economy did to create more jobs, businesses investing and hiring more people, their unemployment rate still went up. And their GDP growth is actually sitting at 1.4%. And that's the slowest rate that their economic growth has been at since the global financial crisis. So I guess we could take some solace in the fact that we're not doing as poorly as our down under counterparts. And even though they are a rugby rival on the pitch, we actually are they're one of our largest trading partners. So when it comes to the economy, we actually do want them to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, good compare and contrast there. Hey, what else has been going on in the markets today?
The NZX Top 50 index closed up a quarter of a percent tonight. That's a rise of 26 points to close at 10,801. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying lower at 63 US cents. That's the lowest it's actually been since April. 93 to the Australian and 50.6 British pence.
Thanks, Madison. Madison Reedy with our business update. More than 250 South Canterbury farmers met with the government officials today to vent their frustrations over the new freshwater policy. Earlier this month, the government announced its plan to restore and protect freshwater in New Zealand from contamination. At a meeting in Timaru, farmers told Ministry for the Environment officials that aspects of the policy were hazy and unrealistic. Nicholas Poynton was at the meeting at Far Lap Raceway.
Farmers travelled from as far as North Otago to express their concerns over the new policy, including the short period they had to make submissions. One farmer sent a clear message to the Ministry's Chief Water Advisor, Brian Smith, that 8 weeks is not enough.
Strong feedback needs to go back to the government that we just haven't got long enough. We need more time to understand some of the intricacies of this document. It's huge, it's complex, a lot of ramifications, and also too, you've said that you need to do some studies on some of the economic impacts that come in this. So I think that's one of the biggest messages, strong messages that need to be taken back to the government.
Vegetable farmer Don McFarlane echoed the same sentiment, saying the brief window has left farmers feeling like the policy is being imposed on them.
It's insufficient, and politically it's not very smart. Yeah, you better let these things work their way through and arrive at a very good consensus rather than be seen to be imposing in a very short consultation period.
But not everyone at the meeting were frustrated farmers. Aaron Wilson-Jones, who owns a lifestyle block in Timaru, says the government is on the right track.
You've got a 90-year plan, but what happens if we don't do this? What do our waterways look like in 90 years? Because I'm seeing them pretty bad now. And shouldn't our discussion be around actually lifting it up, planting more trees and getting it right, rather than protecting our interests? Why don't we as Kiwis actually plant trees and lift up our waterways?
He says something needs to change in time for the next generation to benefit.
Where are we going to be in 300 years? How about my children and their children and their children? Where are we going? And I want my children to be able to swim in the waterways.
Sheep and beef farmer Nikki Hislop says it's not that farmers aren't in support, but they haven't been consulted properly.
We absolutely want to see an improvement in our waterways, but the package that's been put forward feels incredibly prescribed from central government.
A dairy farmer near Waimati, John Gregan, says change is needed but must be realistic. He says proposed nitrate levels of 1 milligram per litre are not feasible.
when you compare it with the rivers in Europe, for example, no one's meeting those standards over there. Well, a handful of countries, likes of Iceland and Finland, but agricultural countries just won't meet those standards. So, are they realistic? I suspect they're not.
The Minister for the Environment, Damien O'Connor, will face the music at a second meeting at Farlap Raceway this evening. In Timaru, for Checkpoint, Nicholas Poynton.
The government and Auckland Council are being told they can't just wash their hands of the Ehumato land dispute. Mana whenua want the contested land returned, but both the council and the government have signalled it's not their problem to fix. Leading Māori academics are challenging that. They say the council and the government played a big role in creating the dispute and they must be prepared to sort it out. Our Māori News correspondent Lee Marama McLaughlin reports.
The Māori King is calling on the government to cut a deal with the site's current owner and developer, Fletcher Residential, to return the land to Mana whenua. Neither the acting Prime Minister, Winston Peters, or Auckland's Mayor, Phil Goff, have committed to that, but Māori political commentator Rawiri Taonui says they should.
Phil Goff has described this as a Māori problem that the kingitangas should sort out. But Auckland's benefited to the tune of an estimable billions of dollars in real estate and industry on confiscated land in South Auckland, and they owe mana whenua something.
The land, which is near Auckland Airport, was taken off Māori by the Crown in 1863. But Dr Taonui says the Crown left mana whenua, namely Te Ahiwaru and Ngāti Mahuta, out of a crucial Auckland Treaty settlement process 10 years ago.
Those actions are directly responsible for the situation that we're seeing today, and the Crown and the Council have to front on the solution.
So what will the government do? Acting Prime Minister Winston Peters maintains that Ehumatau has already been subject to treaty settlement and he's not accepting it has a role to play right now.
We don't wash our hands of anything, but what we are going to do is get inveigled into a conclusion that imperils every other decision that has been made with respect to the Treaty of Waitangi settlements.
The National Party is using the dispute to get one up on the government. Today in the House, National Party MP Nick Smith fired questions at the Māori Development Minister Nanaia Mahuta about whether she agreed with the Māori King.
Will the Minister visit the site and meet with the protesters?
I think the member fails to recognise that I have connections to that area. I don't need to visit a site to know that the rubbish that they created and trying to ram through development without the support of the local community has proven to be a problem, and we have to sort out the mess that he started.
Treaty expert Carwyn Jones says the Crown has played a role in causing the dispute and it does have a responsibility to help find a solution. He says their fears of setting a precedent if they negotiate with Māori after settlement are overblown, and the settlement process does not mean the end of their obligations to Māori.
That rhetoric that gets used in the public, I think, is quite dangerous, does suggest the idea that this is the end of the relationship. We don't need to think about this anymore. It's a little bit concerning to see some of that rhetoric coming to the fore again.
Sole protesters say the Auckland Council rushed through granting Ehumatau special housing status and disregarded mana whenua, so it can't sit this out either. But Mayor Phil Goff has labelled this a treaty matter and says the council has already done its bit to help.
We won't be spending $40 million on buying that land. We have already bought and made available for the public and for Māori alike, for perpetuity, 92 hectares of the key heritage historical and geological land. It's called Otuatawa, Stone Fields.
Rawiri Taonui says the only way he can see the land returning to Māori is if everyone pitches in money, including council, government, Fletchers and maybe mana whenua. But he's picking it will only work if the land is kept as an open space for all New Zealanders.
Looking at the political realities, if the Crown was to say buy the land and then just return it to mana whenua, that might be seen as a step too far in terms of Labour being conscious of a Pākehā backlash.
Today, the government announced it bought the former house of Kate Shepherd for $4.5 million. The news raised several eyebrows among Māoridom, some questioning if the same could be done for Ehumatau, but Winston Peters says it's totally unrelated. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Lee Marama McLaughlin aho.
It's almost 6:15. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think about that. How do we solve the problem at Ehumātao? Should the government step in and buy the land, or what's the solution? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We are getting a lot of feedback from you regarding our interview we did with the marketing manager at Libra, the sanitary pad maker. They have played an ad in Australia that depicted menstrual blood. It attracted some 600 odd official complaints, and the ad authority has chucked all those complaints out. Andy has got in touch to say the Libra ad is shocking when you first see it because society hasn't normalised menstruation and we aren't open about it. Another person's got in touch to say, older male here, the Libra campaign sounds brilliant. I always mocked the blue blood business. As D. Trump would say, so fake. And Matthew has got in touch to say a woman at dinner last year was in need of a pad. After a day at the zoo with the family, I had a couple in my bag because my wife treats me like a pack mule on such occasions. No comment either way from any of our friends, simply a non-issue. Have these complainants been kept in a safe room all their lives? And Matthew says he's 47 years old. Thank you all for getting in touch. We'll get to some more of that a little later in the program. Today is the final day for submissions on the government's abortion legislation bill, and some parents of children with disabilities say they're concerned the bill will lead to more abortions on the grounds of disability. Parents of children with Down syndrome say attitudes have been changing since prenatal screening for disability was introduced around 10 years ago, and they're afraid people with the disability are becoming more and more a minority. Proponents of prenatal screening and the new abortion legislation say it's all about giving women information and choice. Alex Perrottet and cameraman Nick Monroe went to meet some children with Down syndrome and speak with their mums.
Oh, love you. I distinctly remember that conversation, and I remember the change that happened for us because we were so excited and so delighted, and then all of a sudden it was like all of our expectations and hopes just got ripped out from under us.
Rachel Price first got to know Eden had Down's syndrome when she was born, and says she only got over the shock because she knew an adult with Down syndrome who put her fears to rest. Now she has a confident 12-year-old schoolgirl who, like plenty of her friends, plans on becoming a YouTube star.
Hey guys, this is James. Let me room tour. I started to realise unless I was a very terrible parent, I was not going to end up having to help my child through like police issues, drug issues, alcohol issues. None of this was going to be our reality with an adult person with Down syndrome. Yeah, I started to just open up to the possibility of the adult life also being a privilege. And we're not there yet, but I always watch with glee the news reports of people with Down syndrome getting married, and I fully expect that Eden will have love. She'll move out of home because we will make her, much as we love her. We've kind of put a time on it, 25. Going to be pushing you out of the nest.
Gabriel Morton-Jones is also preparing to leave the nest soon. He's turning 18, and he's the fourth of 6 children. Like any kid, he's got a range of options, but really one major passion.
So you actually like Darth Vader?
Yes.
But doesn't he do bad things?
Yes.
But you still like him?
Yes.
Is that because he looks really cool and he wears black?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
and listening to music, rock music?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Star Wars.
Star Wars?
Yep.
What, you dance to Star Wars?
Yep.
What sort of restaurant would you work in?
My own.
Your own?
Yep.
Oh, yeah? What would you call it?
Star Wars.
Star Wars?
Yep.
His mother, Helen, says like any kid, he has more to learn, but having a child with Down syndrome has taught her a lot.
Gabriel's going to be 18. And now, today, what we had is so different to what we had, say, even 20 years ago with the pace of life. I intentionally go slower, and I've learnt that from him. Just every day, as it comes to you, try not to worry about the future.
Ready? Okay, now 2 hands on the front, put your foot in, swing your leg over. Good man.
Agnes Brown couldn't have children and adopted her only child, Reuben, when he was born. She says they tried many times to adopt, but the process was too hard, and they were finally successful with Reuben because they knew his 17-year-old mother.
He's awesome. He certainly has turned our lives upside down, and definitely for the better. We just love him to bits, and he surprises us most days, and yeah, we're so very blessed to have him in our lives. He's very cheeky and bossy.
Agnes says Reuben's birth mother was determined to have her baby despite considerable pressure to have a termination.
Unfortunately, her GP actually was strongly asking her to consider having an abortion and was actually giving the birth mum or the worst scenario if she decided to keep the baby, and which didn't sit very well with the birth mum, and actually dreaded having to go to her health visits because it was always brought up by the GP, and we actually applaud the birth mum for sticking to her guns and not wavering from her decision to actually adopt.
Rachel says she had a similar experience when they were expecting Eden's younger brother.
We were under immense pressure to go and have genetic counselling. Why? Because if we have another child with Down syndrome, we're quite okay with that and we will carry on with the pregnancy. And I said no, and I said no twice, and yet I still got a call from the clinic where they would have done the genetic testing to say, we've made an appointment for you. I don't want the appointment, please cancel it.
Peter Stone is a professor of maternal and fetal medicine at the University of Auckland and did a lot of the work behind the prenatal screening that was introduced around 10 years ago.
Even when I was training, sometimes the first time we knew that something was wrong was when a baby would come out and the baby wouldn't be right.
He says there's no intention to coerce women either way.
I think that's systems. I think that's people saying, oh my gosh, we have not offered this woman this. I think they feel, well, she didn't come for the screening, maybe we have slipped up, rather than thinking, well, maybe she hasn't come for the screening because she didn't want it. And what they would be better to do is actually ring her up on the phone and say, hey, we see you haven't come along for a screen. Do you want it, or actually you don't want it? And if you don't want it, then they should take her off the schedule.
But the New Zealand Downs Syndrome Association says there needs to be far more respect, and health practitioners need to be aware that there's a stigma around Down syndrome, and they should provide more information and greater support. Diane Burnett is the Auckland representative for the association and says when she had her daughter Jada 8 years ago, the social and medical pressure was intense when she wanted to opt out of the prenatal screening process.
I didn't want to have the pressure that medical professionals can put on you to terminate, and also the social pressure, perhaps. So for me, this was our baby, and we wanted this baby, and so screening was not going to make a difference.
Diane says women are just not given the full picture when they find out.
Expectant parents or mothers who receive a pre-diagnosis of Down syndrome are getting very medical and clinical information about children with Down syndrome, and figures on heart conditions and health conditions and hearing loss and eyesight problems and things like that. And I mean, people with Down syndrome are not the only people who have those issues in their life, but they're not getting, what it is actually like to have a child with Down syndrome, or they're not being fully informed about Down syndrome and and what it's like.
Rachel, Helen, Agnes and other women that we spoke to say they're concerned that the development of prenatal testing has led to an assumption that women will want to opt for a termination if they find out that they're carrying a child with Down syndrome. They say that the screening option has become routine, and they also say that women aren't given all the information when they need it, and that's led to a drop in Down syndrome births. They fear that New Zealand is edging closer to what's happened in some European countries where Down syndrome has been almost entirely eradicated. Iceland has almost completely eradicated Down syndrome with only 1 or 2 births a year. It has an early prenatal screening process that's not meant to be routine, but around 85% of pregnant women go through it, and almost everyone who receives a positive result for Down syndrome decide to terminate. The New Zealand Down Syndrome Association says the ratio here has dropped from 1 in 750 births to 1 in 1,200, though those statistics are disputed.
I just find those statistics incredibly heartbreaking. You know, living with this child who brings us to light every day, I just feel like the world is going to miss out on something by not having Down syndrome present, and I would just hate to ever get to the space where we don't have people, you know, like Eden anymore. I feel like New Zealand's kind of on the knife edge now. These diagnoses, when they come, they're so full of fear. There's that awful, crushing moment of, this was not in the plan, what now? And somehow I think we need to do more. Not in that moment to say, you know what, that is a horrible problem, let's just get rid of it. But to say, actually, there's a lot of hope around this journey still. And, you know, and I hope that stories like ours can help other women to see, and other families to see, this life is not a horrible experience by any stretch.
Gabriel's mother, Helen, has even stronger feelings.
I think New Zealand can do better than Iceland. I feel really saddened by hearing that Iceland abort 99% of people with Down syndrome. To me, that seems like a eugenics program, and that's just madness.
Professor Peter Stone says it's completely up to the individual woman, and all the information they need is at hand.
Increasingly, they're given a pretty full picture. I mean, it's fair to say every clinician is different in the way that they may interact with the woman. If you've delivered enough babies in your lifetime, you're going to see babies that didn't come out the way you expected them to come out.
Eden's mother, Rachel, has signed an open letter to the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, regarding the bill decriminalising abortion. They say in 2017 the Prime Minister promised that abortion changes would not include removing the gestational limit of 20 weeks for an abortion on the grounds of disability. The abortion legislation bill would allow abortion on the grounds of the woman's well-being after 20 weeks on the approval of one health practitioner. Disability groups say changes to the abortion law in Victoria, Australia, back in 2008 were not as liberal, yet in the following 10 years, 1,685 abortions were performed after 20 weeks on fetuses with a confirmed or suspected disability, almost a third of them for Down's syndrome. But Peter Stone says choice is paramount, and those who choose to have a Down syndrome child shouldn't be telling everyone else to do the same.
The women that choose to have a baby with Down syndrome or trisomy 18 or Turner syndrome or whatever, they can have their baby, and they can be incredibly well supported by associations, and they will be well supported by the health services. And there are other women who the thought of having a child that will have some problems, greater or lesser extent, and if a woman decides that that's not for her, then that's, in our society and in the way we work, and in many societies, we accord individuals that right, and that's what it's about.
Ruben's mother, Agnes, says real choice only happens when you have all the information and assurances of support. As a woman who voluntarily sought out her son Ruben, she says she only wishes there were more opportunities for people like her to provide that support for women feeling the pressure.
Most people know that with Down syndrome that they carry the happy gene. They're always smiling, and they have that happy disposition. I mean, they do have their moments. They are strong-willed, and but overall, for Reuben, it's very rare that he's cranky. He's always a happy-go-lucky child. And we're very fortunate. Oh, that's nice. That's a nice cuddle.
And Alex's piece will go up on our website. Now, more on our interview with Libra about showing period blood in TV ads. Gabby writes, "How exciting. I look forward to seeing ads on TV showing real poo in real toilets and real boogers on real handkerchiefs, real pus and real pimples. These people need to grow up." Chris, on the other hand, says bowel movements are natural too, but most people don't want to do them in public. And someone else has been in contact to say, "Awesome work, Liba. Periods are literally what enables humans to exist and are nothing to be ashamed of." And this one's saying, "Absolutely agree with Libra's Aussie campaign to normalise menstruation. It's weirdly fascinating to hear some of the complaints lodged. Get over it, they say. Let women get on with it."
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. A treaty researcher says the Crown has played a role in causing the disputed ihu mātau and now must help find a solution. Mana whenua of the South Auckland site reached a consensus yesterday that they want the land back and out of private ownership. But the Acting Prime Minister Winston Peters says if the government intervened, it would set a precedent and it would have to revisit other treaty settlements. However, Carwyn Jones says the government's fears of setting a bad precedent are overblown. He says the settlement process does not mean the end of the Crown's obligations to Māori.
That rhetoric that gets used in the public, I think, is quite dangerous, does suggest the idea that this is the end of the relationship. We don't need to think about this anymore. It's a little bit concerning to see some of that rhetoric coming to the fore again.
Treaty lecturer and lawyer Dr. Carwyn Jones. The Japanese Prime Minister has wished the All Blacks luck to make it through to the Rugby World Cup finals. Jacinda Ardern and her Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe met in Tokyo today. Through a translator, Mr. Abe spoke at an event where the two leaders exchanged national team shirts and rugby balls.
I wish the All Blacks on a winning streak a huge success at Rugby World Cup 2019 and sincerely hope that Japan's national team, the Brave Blossoms, will meet them at the finals.
This afternoon, All Blacks coach Steve Hansen largely named the side that overran Australia 36-0 in the final Bledisloe Cup test for Saturday's World Cup opener in Tokyo. A South Canterbury farmer says if farming is to continue in New Zealand, nitrogen standards in the government's proposed freshwater action plan will have to be reassessed. More than 250 farmers gathered in Timaru this afternoon to hear officials outline aspects of the policy that will affect them. Proposals include putting interim controls on land intensification, fencing off more waterways and tougher limits for nitrogen leaching. A dairy farmer near Waimate, John Gregan, says farmers realise the sector needs to improve, but any changes need to be realistic.
Some of the things they've put in place they haven't really thought through very hard because I don't think they'll be possible. It'll be very, very difficult to implement. For instance, the low nitrogen level they're talking about in the rivers, they're impossible standards to meet. So if farming's going to continue in New Zealand, they'll have to relook at those standards for sure, yeah.
John Gregan says analysis is needed of the economic impact the proposals could have on rural communities. Global conditions are being cited as the main reason for slowing economic growth, with the annual rate the weakest in close to 6 years. Gross domestic product rose a seasonally adjusted 0.5% in the 3 months to the end of June, in line with forecasts but down marginally on the previous quarter. The economy grew at an annual rate of 2.1%, the lowest since the end of 2013. The Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the economy is responding to international conditions.
Obviously that is a reflection of the global environment that we're in. It still sees New Zealand tracking ahead of a number of our trading partners. Some good results and positive results in the services sector, but clearly in our export exposed industries and manufacturing there is a hit.
Grant Robertson says the latest growth figures are for the period up to the end of June, and new spending in the budget that should stimulate the economy doesn't kick in until July. The Wellington and Porirua Polytechnics have told staff they are cutting the equivalent of 55 full-time teaching jobs. Welltech and Whitireia have been struggling financially because of falling enrolments, and Whitireia last year needed a $15 million government bailout. The Institute's Chief Executive Chris Gosling says the redundancies are fewer than originally planned.
In our original proposal, we'd indicated that we'd be reducing staffing by around about 72 full-time equivalent. After considering all the feedback that we've received, the decision today is a reduction of around about 55 full-time equivalent staffing.
Chris Gosling says the layoffs will save the institutes up to $4 million a year. The US President Donald Trump is putting the city of San Francisco on notice over its homeless problem and resulting pollution. He's given the Environmental Protection Agency less than a week to issue a notice to the city, saying it needs to clean itself up. He says it's an environmental issue because pollution, including syringes used by homeless addicts to inject drugs, is flowing into the Pacific Ocean. Mr. Trump is in a political war with officials in California over what he believes is their failure to tackle the growing number of people living on the streets. A serious crash on State Highway 1 near Autokey has closed the southbound lane, with the transport agency warning motorists to expect major delays. It happened south of Autokey just before 5 o'clock. Traffic is being diverted via South Manukau and Waitohu Valley roads. It's just after 6:05. Bowden Barrett will start at fullback, with Richie Mo'unga returning at first 5'8" for the All Blacks World Cup opener against South Africa in Tokyo on Saturday night. Mo'unga missed the side's last test, their 92-7 win over Tonga, due to injury, with Barrett playing in the number 10 jersey. The side's largely that which easily beat Australia in the final Bledisloe Cup test, with the only change being at lock, where Scott Barrett replaces Patrick Tuipulotu, who drops to the reserve. Ryan Crotty and Anton Leonard-Brown are the midfield pairing, with Sonny Bill Williams on the bench. Coach Steve Hansen says Crotty has been impressive upon his return from injury and offers leadership.
I know there's a lot of talk about how we've never settled on a combination, but I think the versatility of this group allows us to play whoever we want and the combination clicks. People are used to seeing a Marnono, Conrad Smith type combination, but again, I think if you reflect back on the last World Cup, we changed that up a bit, and final itself was a great example. We swapped Conrad out at half time and Sonny came on. So your combinations now have got to be more than just two people, they've got to be your whole team.
Steve Hansen. The Breakers will be without their captain in the lead-up to the new Australian Basketball League season. Tom Abercrombie has been ruled out for up to 3 weeks with a quad injury, a day out from the pre-season tournament in Hobart. He's expected to be fit for their season opener against the Sydney Kings, but is likely to miss pre-season games against NBA sides, the Memphis Grizzlies and Oklahoma City Thunder in the United States. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Brad Warrington is our cultural ambassador as we continue our short history of New Zealand hip-hop. Plus, overseas correspondent Sharon Dallywell joins us from London with an Asian-British perspective on the latest Brexit news. And as always, we're looking for your little piece of heaven just after 7, the song that takes you to your happy place and the story behind it. Join me, Emile Donovan, in for Brian Crump tonight from 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, a few showers, mainly in the north and east. Auckland to Taumaranui and Taupo, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods and isolated showers. Taranaki, Taihape, Whanganui, Manawatu, Horowhenua and Kapiti, mostly fine. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, fine tonight, a few showers developing tomorrow morning. For Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland, Canterbury, North and Central Otago and Dunedin, mostly fine but some cloudy periods tomorrow. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Chatham Islands, occasional showers and strong southwesterlies, both easing tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is looking to take a more hands-off approach to the Ehumato dispute while she's overseas, saying she expects other ministers to deal with it until she's back in the country. Ms Ardern is in Japan this week, where she met with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe earlier this afternoon. Back home, the Māori king, Kingi Te Heitia, says mana whenua have reached a consensus that they want Ehumato back from building developer Fletcher's. A few months ago, in July, Ms Ardern intervened and a halt was put on any building on the site until the dispute was resolved. Speaking to reporters in Tokyo a short time ago, she was asked whether there'd been any recent discussions with Fletcher's.
And look, we've been engaging with all of the parties that have been involved with Ehumato. So obviously mana whenua, Kingitanga has been coordinating talks, and obviously there's the commercial interests of Fletcher's as well. There's a process to work through, but we see a role to help ensure that we find a resolution for Ehumato.
You got Fletcher's to put a halt on construction starting. Given that, what's the government telling Fletcher's now?
Oh, of course, we absolutely recognise with Ehumato, we're mindful that there are the interests of mana whenua. There are also heritage interests that will need to be kept in mind as well, and then there's the commercial interests of Fletcher's. It's one of the reasons this has been a complex issue to resolve, but alongside Kingitanga, we are very committed to helping see a resolution.
Are you sure that mana whenua has reached consensus? Winston Peters didn't seem to think so or question that on the report this morning.
Of course, I held great faith in the process that Kingitanga went through and what they've presented on behalf of mana whenua.
Fletcher's has said that they want urgent discussions to start. Do you know when that's going to start? Because the government surely can't not be involved in that.
And look, we absolutely see the role that's to be played there, but ultimately those are discussions that whilst I'm here, I have an expectation that ministers in New Zealand will be picking up those issues.
And that was Jacinda Ardern speaking to the media in Tokyo. The government stepped in to buy Kate Shepherd's former Christchurch home, where the petition demanding women's voting rights was glued together 126 years ago. The villa will become an educational centre for university research projects and school history trips, and made available for public access and events. But now the hunt is on to find some of its original furnishings. Katie Todd reports.
As the sun shone on the perfectly manicured lawns at 83 Clyde Road this morning, celebratory scones and speeches were in order. The private property signs adorning Kate Shepherd's former 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom home were officially obsolete after the government handed over $4.5 million to make it a public asset. It's now being managed by the University of Canterbury and Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga. Heritage New Zealand's board chair Marian Hobbs told guests she's thrilled Canterbury is showing pride in one of its women.
We get Kate and other wonderful suffrage women on the $10 note and the all wonderful National Memorial here in Christchurch to women's suffrage. But here is a physical connection. It is a building. You can actually imagine them sitting round the kitchen table. You can imagine them walking out over there among these gorgeous gardens.
The purchase earned a warm thank you from Christchurch Mayor Leanne Dalzell, who says the government's secured an essential slice of the country's history.
We can all be proud of the leadership of Kate Shepherd and be inspired by the story that resonates in our city today. From her home, she can continue to inspire young women to be the change we want to see in the world, to take on global challenges and to do so with tenacity and courage.
The government's had its eye on the property since last October when it went up for auction and failed to sell. But Minister for Greater Christchurch Regeneration Megan Woods was quick to defend the time it's taken to finalise the sale.
It was a commercial property negotiation. There were several attempts at it, but I think it's quite fitting there were several attempts at the petition to win the right to vote as well.
Exactly how the house might be renovated or refurnished is yet to be decided, but Ms Hobbs says one part will be set aside for functions like weddings, some rooms will be academic spaces, and the most significant rooms will tell the story of Kate Shepherd and the social change she inspired. She says the home will remain close to its original design, so Ms Shepherd herself would recognise it if she was to ride up the gravel driveway on her bike. Staff from the Christchurch Botanic Gardens will keep its acre gardens in check, and Heritage New Zealand's Deputy Chief Executive Operations Nick Jackson says it would be a big bonus to reinstate some of the home's original elements.
We're hoping that if anybody has any of the furniture that Kate Shepherd had, that they might want to step forward, and there's now a good place for that furniture to go. We do know that when Kate left New Zealand, there was an auction and all of her personal effects were sold at that auction. So we are hopeful that some original items may actually return to the house.
The University of Canterbury is also welcoming the opportunity to throw the gates of Kate Shepherd's home open to future generations. Chancellor Sue McCormack says it's fitting female leaders, including Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, local MP Megan Woods and Christchurch Mayor Leanne Dalzell, have united to protect the heritage site. She says today was a poignant occasion of which Kate herself might have been justly proud. In Christchurch, for Checkpoint, ko Katie Todd, TNA.
And Katie's piece will go up online. If you're interested in having a quick little visual tour around Kate Shepherd's house, you'll see those pictures in her story. Returning now to an earlier story, in Australia, an ad made for the menstrual product company Libra has become the most complained about advertisement of the year. It's the first time an ad shown on Australian TV has depicted period blood, and it received more than 600 complaints. But the ad standards panel has dismissed every one of those complaints, in a move being praised for helping to remove the stigma around menstruation. Here's the ABC's Julia Holman.
It's a slick 2.5-minute, highly produced ad that debuted on Australian screens earlier this year during primetime shows like The Bachelor and Gogglebox. There's dozens of scenarios depicted. A woman at a dinner party asks if anyone has a pad. Another woman writes her out of office on her email, saying she's got a heavy period and will be working from home. And a young man buys some pads from a local store, presumably for his girlfriend. And then there's a scene that has broken new ground for Australian television.
Well, there's one shot of some quite thin, watery blood rolling down the inside of a woman's thigh while she's in the shower.
Lara Owen is with Monash Business School and is completing her PhD looking at menstrual products.
Well, it was first shown in Europe a couple of years ago. It's notable because historically, menstrual advertising has shown menstrual blood as blue liquid being squirted onto a pad by someone in a lab coat.
The ad, which was produced for menstrual product company Libra, has become the most complained about ad for the year here in Australia, receiving more than 600 complaints.
The fact that it's shocking is the shocking bit, because it's just a period every second person gets them.
Dee Madigan is the creative director of Campaign Edge and a panellist on ABC TV's Gruen Transfer. She spent many years working on campaigns for menstrual products like pads and tampons, but says executives always balked when she suggested depicting blood.
We were just told we couldn't, we can't have that on there. Hell, you could barely use the word period. It's like women on TV didn't have periods. They had heavy days and light days.
She says the ad was clearly designed to be controversial, but it's an excellent marketing strategy.
For the target market, who are probably 14-year-old girls, because what you want with any sort of brand, you want them to start using your brand first and then they're more likely to stick to it, is sort of say to them, hey, we understand you. I mean, the idea somehow that period blood is more offensive than other blood. There's plenty of ads out there with blood in them, Band-Aid ads and that. No one complains about that.
Yumi Steins is a broadcaster and the co-author of a book released last month called Welcome to Your Period. She says there's not much practical information relevant to young women and girls about the realities of getting your period.
In no way were girls ever given an explanation of what actually happens, to your underpants, or, what the colour of the blood might look like the first time you get a period.
She says there's still a lot of stigma about this normal bodily function, although she thinks it's improving.
I've got a couple of daughters who are teenagers and they and their friends speak with a lot more frankness than I did with my friends. So I think that the younger kids are feeling more confident and less shamed. I think it depends on which culture you're coming from.
The body that handles complaints about public advertising, ad standards, dismissed all the complaints against the ad, ruling that it did not breach the industry's code of ethics.
And that was the ABC's Julia Holman. Now, we're getting so much feedback on this story. Judith has been in touch saying, having spent years trying to teach my daughter, who has an intellectual disability, that periods are normal and the blood is not because of an injury, I fully endorse Libra's attempts to normalise periods. When I was a teenager, I had to do the walk of shame from the toilets at school to the incinerator with my pads, which was not in the toilet block. Any progress on this matter is fantastic. It should really not be a shock to anyone to discover that periods are about bleeding. Viv, on the other hand, says, I feel that the company is just exploiting a way to make more money, and never mind that people find it offensive. It's just further evidence that nothing is private. Plus, men are not comfortable with such ads in their homes. I don't feel freed by having my personal female trials broadcast on TV. Thanks for getting in touch, Viv. Helen writes, people are offended by the depiction of actual menstrual blood. Thank goodness the truth is being shown, because based on past advertising, some people out there probably think women shed blue liquid once a month. Now that would be something to worry about unless your name is Smurfette. Cheers, Helen. And this last one, we don't show poo to sell toilet paper, so why show blood for hygiene products? Thank you all for getting in touch. It is about 19 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. In an upstairs room at a New Plymouth lifestyle block with a view across to Mount Taranaki, a scientist is helping colleagues fly drones into volcanic plumes half a world away in Papua New Guinea. Their mission? To study gases in the plume to help better predict potential volcanic eruptions. Our Taranaki Wakanui reporter Robin Martin has more.
Volcano geochemist Cindy Werner is the eye in the sky for Kiwi scientist Dr. Ian Schipper, who has developed specially reinforced drones to bag gases from inside volcanic plumes and bring them back out for testing. The Victoria University volcanologist and an international team of scientists are currently 4,000 kilometres north in Bougainville, taking samples from the 1,700-metre Bagana volcano, one of Melanesia's youngest and most active volcanoes. This is where Missouri-born Dr. Werner comes in.
You have to get downwind of the volcano, and at the summits of these volcanoes, the wind conditions can be very different than when you're than when you're sitting on the ground. So what I've been doing for Ian is helping him to understand what those wind conditions are at the height where the gas is coming out of the volcano.
Dr. Werner is relaying information from the latest satellite weather and plume imaging forecasts to direct the team on the ground about when and where to put up the drones. She does it using a Garmin InReach device, a two-way satellite communicator which allows her to text message Dr. Schipper. Not that he can text back just at the moment.
So he dropped his phone, unfortunately, in the river, and the phone uses Bluetooth to connect to the InReach device. So the InReach device is connecting to the satellites, and then you use your phone to communicate with the device. So I'm able to use my phone to send this data to the Iridium device, but yeah, unfortunately, he's not able to communicate very efficiently right now.
Dr. Schipper is camped about 7 kilometres from Bagana and is hiking another 3 kilometres into the drone launch site. Dr. Werner says the team is using two types of drone.
Ian has developed a rotocopter UAV that has on board a miniaturized UV spectrometer that's able to look up through the plume and measure the amount of SO2 in that plume. The other team is bringing a fixed-wing UAV, and that is flying through the plume and measuring the gas composition.
Dr. Werner says geochemistry has come a long way, and it's important to measure the gases because it relates to the amount of magma and how quickly it comes to the surface, giving useful hints at upcoming eruptions. Brad Scott, a volcanologist at GNS Science, is also excited about the prospects of Dr. Schipper's work.
Bagana, one of the volcanoes they've gone to, is renowned to be the largest degassing volcano in the southern hemisphere, if not globally. So they've certainly picked on a target that puts out a lot of gas, and if they can quantify the gas coming from there with the technology, then yeah, it could be certainly transferable to our volcanoes here in New Zealand.
But Dr. Scott says gas emissions are just part of the story.
Well, one of the joys of working with volcanoes is they always put their hand up before an eruption. Our challenge is to recognise that they've got the hand up and how high it's got it up. The gas signature is a significant part of the story, but earthquake and ground deformation data are also required, and if there's water around, the water chemistry as well.
Meanwhile, Dr. Werner is keeping an eye on the sleeping giant out of the office window.
Well, yeah, Mount Taranaki is overdue for an eruption, and I feel that we should definitely be looking at Mount Taranaki more closely, and that's part of my aim living here in beautiful New Plymouth.
Dr. Shipper's Walker Lab project has received support from the Marsden Fund and the EQC. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahiponei, ko Robin Martinaho.
A warning now to middle-aged Fleetwood Mac fans. If you turn up with a skinful at the gig, it's likely to be the most expensive concert you never saw. Dunedin police say people downing cheap alcohol before they get to the stadium are having a few too many, and the culprits are mainly women. I spoke to Sergeant Ian Paulin, who's in charge of alcohol harm in Dunedin, where Fleetwood Mac's playing on Saturday.
It's probably a problem that the whole country sees, but when we as a population preload before a concert, we tend to err on the side of too much, no, not too little, and that creates a wee problem at the gates when people can't get in.
So spell it out for us. What's preloading?
So preloading is having a number of drinks before you get into the venue, and it's pretty common across the country, across big events, rugby games, concerts, etc. So I suppose the alcohol that's purchased from an off-licence is cheaper than an on-licence, so that tends to tip the balance towards having some drinks at home or on the way there, and usually the volume is just a couple too many.
So I know it's an issue around the place, but specifically in your neck of the woods, who are we talking about here? Who are the ones most likely to kind of go a little bit too far with the preloading?
Well, I suppose the demographic for the concerts we've had in the last wee while, and certainly for Fleetwood Mac that we've got on Saturday, tend to be your people middle-aged, the 40 plus, and so that it tends to put it in that category. I'd say, looking at the concerts we've had, we've probably got more of a female demographic than a male. So maybe we see, just from the sheer numbers, more women are preloading too much, and they're just getting turned away at the gates. The security do a good job at vetting people as they walk up. So when you can't get in and you've shelled out the best part of $300 for a ticket, you tend to get a wee bit upset.
Yeah, so drunk middle-aged women we're talking here. How do you pick them up at the gates? What are they? I mean, how does this sort of show itself?
Well, all the signs of intoxication can become pretty evident, especially if you've got a queue. You can tend to hold things together for 20, 30 seconds, but when you've got to talk to a security guard, stand in front of them, you tend to get a bit wobbly, your speech isn't the best, your coordination's gone. You tend to get a wee bit colourful with your language when they're starting to turn you away. So security are really real practiced in turning people away, and it's when they become argumentative and push the issue that police get involved.
Hey, so have you ever been at one of those concert situations where you've had to say to a drunk middle-aged woman, sorry, I know you've paid $300 for the ticket, but you're out?
Well, we haven't removed that. It's the security's job. It's when they're outside and arguing that they've spent this money, they need to get in, and it's like, well, you can't get in. It's a licensed premises. You can't go into any bar anywhere in the country when you're intoxicated. It's the same for a concert venue, same for Forsyth Bar in Dunedin, and they've got to realise when it doesn't matter if you've bought a $300 ticket or not, you just can't enter that place. So that's when the discussion usually ends up with a trip to the police station where they can have a look at a cell wall instead of looking at a concert.
Mm-hmm. Hey, so what, 30,000 punters you're expecting at Fleetwood Mac, yeah? Roundabout?
Just under 30,000, yeah.
So you're going to be there. What will your job be on the night?
So as alcohol harm prevention sergeant, I run one of our teams that's there. So we're focusing on supporting the security. The security is the main people that look after all the intoxication, all the any crowd issues, and we're there to assist them. And they do a fantastic job. Red Badge Security run the stadium, and pretty experienced bunch. So we're pretty much there to support them, and if things go a wee bit awry, then that's when we step in and we'll take the appropriate action.
This is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of the times the message is being sent to young people around alcohol. You'd think that people of this age group should probably know a bit better?
Preloading is right across the board. Doesn't matter, gender or age, and it's probably when you look at the concert demographic. If we looked at a Kendrick Lamar concert that we had last year, that was a really young age group, and we had very, very young people, underage people consuming vast amounts of RTDs and other substances and not getting into the concert. You just got to look at what is the demographic we're looking at for this concert, and then we police and approach it appropriately.
A lot of those people are probably listening now, so what's your message to them?
There's nothing wrong with having a couple of drinks with your mates before a concert. It's just you've got to just apply a bit of common sense, because my experience of 30 years of policing would show that no one makes a good decision when they're intoxicated. So stay on the good side of the ledger, and you'll make a great decision.
So that's Sergeant Ian Paulin there. And just before we go, some feedback on Ehumato. This person, Annie, says, absolutely the government must buy this precious piece of land and protect it for all time. Steve from Birkenhead says, if Fletcher's were building on a subdivision besides Stonehenge, the British government would buy the land. Ehumato is so historically special. It is our Stonehenge. Mike reckons if they sold it to Fletcher's after the treaty settlement, why don't they just buy it back? And Bruce has got in touch to say, why should we do what Māori want? We paid for iwi land claims. It is a gravy train for many. And this one in from Dave, who says, if someone wants to start up a Give a Little page to buy the land, I will contribute. And he says, cheers, Dave. By the way, he says, I'm a Pākehā. Hey, thank you so much for getting into touch today with all your very thoughtful feedback. Sorry we can't get through all of it. Don't forget, you can go back online and check out some of our visual stories. Alex Perrottet and Nick Munro's piece on the Down syndrome children, some gorgeous pictures in that. And Katie's piece on Kate Shepherd's house. You can get a quick tour of her digs. We will be back tomorrow. Do have a wonderful evening. Catch you then.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A Treaty of Waitangi researcher says the Crown must help find a solution to the land dispute at Ehumato because it played a role in causing it. All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has named almost the same winning side from the Bledisloe Cup test for this Saturday's World Cup opener in Tokyo. A South Canterbury farmer says the government's proposals for reducing nitrogen levels in rivers are impossible to meet if farming is to continue. And staff of Welltech and Whitireia Polytechnics have been told 55 full-time equivalent teaching jobs will go in a cost-saving measure. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7 o'clock.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Because I'm only saying what the science is saying, and you can't argue against physics.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late-night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
Fuel is an important commodity. Most New Zealanders rely on it. It's a grudge